My name is Eleanor Williams, and at 67 years old, I never imagined having to bury Gerald, my husband of 45 years, alone. The empty chair beside me at the funeral should have been filled by our only son, Raymond. Instead, he chose to celebrate his wife Amanda's birthday party that day. The pain of his absence cut deeper than my grief. I kept my composure through the service, but what Raymond didn't know was that I had already made a decision that would change everything between us. Before I dive deeper into how my son broke my heart, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to make tough family decisions. Gerald and I met during our sophomore year at Connecticut State University in the fall of 1976. I was studying English literature, hoping to become a teacher someday, while Gerald was pursuing his degree in history with the same career goal in mind. We quite literally bumped into each other in the university library. I was carrying a stack of books that blocked my view, and Gerald was rushing to his next class. The collision sent my books scattering across the floor, and as we both knelt to gather them, our eyes met. It sounds like something from a romance novel, but I truly knew in that moment that he was special. Our courtship was a whirlwind of long walks around campus, study dates that involved more talking than studying, and sharing our dreams of the future. Gerald proposed to me 6 months later on a snowy evening in February, with nothing but a simple gold band he had saved up for by working extra shifts at the campus bookstore. We married in a small ceremony at my parents' church that summer, with just close family and a few friends in attendance. We couldn't afford anything lavish, but it didn't matter to us. Our early years of marriage were filled with financial struggles but abundant love. We rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment near the elementary school where I secured my first teaching position. Gerald was still finishing his final year of university, and I supported us on my modest teacher's salary. We ate a lot of pasta and learned to be creative with our limited resources. Those lean years taught us resilience and appreciation for the simple joys in life. After 3 years of marriage, we decided to start trying for a baby. What we thought would be an easy journey turned into years of heartbreak and disappointment. After numerous doctor visits and treatments, we had almost given up hope when the miracle happened. I still remember staring at the positive pregnancy test in disbelief, then bursting into tears when I told Gerald. He held me so tight I could barely breathe, both of us crying with joy. Raymond Andrew Williams was born on April 12, 1984, after 22 hours of labor. The moment they placed him in my arms, all the years of waiting and disappointment melted away. Gerald was so overcome with emotion he could barely hold Raymond without his hands shaking. That night, as our newborn son slept in the hospital bassinet, Gerald whispered to me, "He's our one and only miracle, Eleanor. I promised to be the best father I can be to him." And he kept that promise. Despite working full-time as a history teacher at Westfield High School, Gerald never missed a moment of Raymond's childhood. He coached Raymond's Little League baseball team every spring, spent hours helping with homework and science fair projects, and taught him everything from how to ride a bike to how to treat others with respect and kindness. Our home was modest but filled with love and laughter. We saved enough to buy a small 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood when Raymond was 5 years old. It had a backyard where Gerald built a treehouse that became Raymond's favorite place to read and play. Sunday dinners were sacred in our family, a time when we shared our experiences from the week and made plans for the future. Every summer, we would pack up our station wagon and go camping in the White Mountains for 2 weeks, teaching Raymond about nature and creating memories that I still cherish. Raymond was an intelligent, curious child who excelled in school. He inherited Gerald's passion for history and my love of reading. Throughout elementary and high school, he maintained excellent grades and participated in numerous extracurricular activities. Gerald attended every debate competition, science fair, and baseball game, beaming with pride from the sidelines. The bond between father and son was something special to witness. When Raymond was accepted to Cornell University to study engineering, we were ecstatic but concerned about the cost. Without telling Raymond, Gerald took on extra tutoring jobs after school and during summer breaks to help pay the steep tuition bills. I picked up additional administrative work at my school during holidays. We were determined not to burden our son with excessive student loans if we could help it. During his final year at Cornell, Raymond met Amanda Parker, a marketing major with ambitious career goals. When he first brought her home during winter break, she seemed polite and charming. Gerald and I were happy that our son had found someone who seemed to care for him deeply. Amanda complimented my cooking, asked Gerald thoughtful questions about his teaching career, and appeared genuinely interested in our family photos and stories. If only we had recognized the warning signs beneath her carefully cultivated first impression. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20, and none of us could have predicted how Amanda would gradually come between Raymond and our family, particularly his father. Raymond and Amanda dated for 18 months before he proposed. The engagement dinner at our home was lovely, with Amanda discussing wedding plans excitedly. They initially talked about a medium-sized wedding with around 100 guests, which seemed reasonable to us. Gerald and I offered to contribute $15,000 toward their special day, nearly all of our modest savings, but we wanted to help make their wedding memorable. 2 months later, Raymond called to inform us that the wedding plans had changed. Amanda had decided she wanted a smaller, more intimate ceremony with just 30 guests. While this meant a potentially less expensive event, it also meant that many of our extended family members and Gerald's colleagues who had watched Raymond grow up would not be invited. Gerald was particularly hurt when he learned that his brother Thomas and family were cut from the guest list to make room for Amanda's college friends. When I gently asked Raymond about these changes, he became defensive. "Mom, it's Amanda's day. She should have it exactly how she wants it," he said. Gerald, ever the peacemaker, told me to let it go. "As long as Raymond is happy, that's what matters," he said, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. The wedding was beautiful but subdued. Amanda looked stunning in her designer gown, and Raymond beamed with pride. During the reception, I noticed that Amanda pulled Raymond away whenever he spent too much time talking with us or other family members. She always had someone important she wanted him to meet or something urgent that needed his attention. After the wedding, Raymond and Amanda moved to Boston for their respective careers. In the first year of their marriage, our Sunday family dinners dwindled from once a week when they visited Connecticut to once a month, then to major holidays only. Each time I suggested visiting them in Boston, Amanda had a reason why it wasn't a good time. They were redecorating, she had work deadlines, they had prior commitments with her family or friends. The first Thanksgiving after their wedding was particularly revealing. Raymond had promised they would spend the holiday with us, but 3 days before, he called to say they would be going to Amanda's parents' home instead. "Her mom has been planning this for months and I didn't realize," he explained weakly. When I mentioned that I had already bought the ingredients for his favorite dishes, he sighed and said, "I'm sorry, Mom. You know how it is. I can't disappoint Amanda." Gerald said nothing about the change of plans, but that night I found him sitting alone in Raymond's old bedroom, looking at photo albums from our son's childhood. When I sat beside him, he simply said, "He's an adult now, Eleanor. We have to respect his choices even when they hurt." It was the first time I realized how deeply Gerald was affected by Raymond's gradual withdrawal from our lives. 5 years before the events that would change everything, Gerald was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer. The day we received the diagnosis, I called Raymond immediately. He seemed appropriately concerned and promised to come that weekend. Friday evening came and went with no Raymond. When he finally called Saturday morning, he explained that Amanda had surprised him with tickets to a Broadway show they couldn't miss. "It's her birthday month, Mom. You understand, right? We'll come next weekend for sure." But the next weekend never came. Instead, there were text messages with excuses. Amanda wasn't feeling well, his project at work had a deadline, Amanda's parents had surprised them with a visit. Each excuse felt more hollow than the last. Throughout Gerald's initial treatment, Raymond visited exactly twice. Each time, Amanda accompanied him, constantly checking her watch and creating reasons why they couldn't stay long. During Gerald's first round of chemotherapy, when he was violently ill and losing weight rapidly, I asked Raymond if he could come stay for a few days to help. "Mom, I just can't get away from work right now," he said. "Besides, Amanda doesn't handle sickness well. It really upsets her." Meanwhile, I was juggling teaching full-time and caring for Gerald. Our neighbors and Gerald's colleagues from school provided more support than our own son. Barbara Thompson, my best friend since college, drove Gerald to chemotherapy appointments when I couldn't take time off work. Martin Lewis, the physics teacher who had the classroom next to Gerald's for 20 years, organized a meal train with other teachers. Our community surrounded us with love and practical help while Raymond remained distant. Gerald never complained about Raymond's absence. When I would express my frustration and hurt, he would simply say, "Raymond has his own life now, Eleanor. Amanda is his priority, and that's as it should be." But I could see the sadness in his eyes when Raymond would cancel yet another visit or cut short a phone call because Amanda needed him for something. The most painful moment came when Gerald had to undergo a major surgery to remove part of his colon. I informed Raymond 3 weeks in advance, giving him plenty of time to arrange to be there. The day before the surgery, Raymond called to say he couldn't make it. Amanda's boss is having a dinner party that could really help her career. "I need to be there as her husband," he explained. I handed the phone to Gerald, who was weak but alert in his hospital bed. I watched as my husband's face fell, but he rallied and told Raymond not to worry, that everything would be fine. After he hung up, Gerald turned to me with tears in his eyes and said, "I don't want you to hold this against him, Eleanor. Raymond is caught between two worlds, and it's not entirely his fault." In that moment, I marveled at my husband's capacity for forgiveness, even as my own resentment toward both Raymond and Amanda continued to grow. 3 years after his initial diagnosis, despite aggressive treatment and Gerald's indomitable spirit, the cancer returned with a vengeance. This time it had spread to his liver and lungs. Our oncologist, Dr. Patricia Wright, sat us down and gently explained that while they could offer palliative treatment, Gerald's condition was terminal. When we asked about the timeline, her eyes filled with compassion as she said, "Months, not years. Perhaps 6 to 8 months with treatment." The drive home from that appointment was silent, both of us processing the finality of those words. That evening, as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset, Gerald reached for my hand and said, "I've had a good life, Eleanor. 45 years with you, watching Raymond grow up, touching the lives of my students. I don't have regrets." But I knew that wasn't entirely true. Gerald's one heartache was the distance that had grown between him and Raymond. Despite this, he insisted on calling Raymond himself to share the prognosis. I listened from the kitchen as Gerald spoke calmly about his condition, downplaying the severity in a way that made me both admire and resent his selflessness. Raymond promised to visit soon, and Gerald brightened momentarily at the prospect. 2 weeks passed with no visit. Then 3. When Raymond finally came, he stayed for exactly 4 hours before announcing he needed to get back to Boston for a work emergency. Amanda had not accompanied him, citing allergies to our cat Jasper, though we'd never had a cat in our home. As Gerald's condition deteriorated, I took a leave of absence from teaching to care for him full-time. The physical demands were enormous. Administering medications, helping him bathe, changing bedsheets when night sweat soaked them through, preparing special meals that he could barely eat but would try to for my sake. The emotional toll was even greater, watching this vibrant, intellectual man who had captivated classrooms of teenagers for 35 years struggle to complete a simple sentence as the pain medication clouded his mind. Barbara came by almost daily bringing groceries, sitting with Gerald so I could shower or take a brief walk to clear my head. Martin organized a group of teachers who took turns mowing our lawn, shoveling snow from our driveway, and handling household repairs. Our community rallied around us in ways that both humbled and sustained me. 6 months after the terminal diagnosis, on a crystal-clear morning in early March, Gerald had a rare moment of complete lucidity. The hospice nurse had just left after adjusting his medication, and we were alone in the sunroom where we'd set up his hospital bed, so he could look out at the garden he had tended so lovingly for decades. "Eleanor," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks, "I need to tell you something important." I sat beside him, holding his thin hand between both of mine, and waited. "I know you're angry with Raymond," he continued, "and you have every right to be. But please, after I'm gone, try to rebuild your relationship with him. He's going to need you even if he doesn't realize it now. Amanda has a strong hold on him, but someday he might see clearly." I tried to interrupt, but Gerald shook his head. "Let me finish, my love. You're stronger than you know. You'll grieve, but you'll also heal and find a new path forward. Promise me you'll try with Raymond. Not for his sake but for yours. Holding on to anger will only hurt you in the end. Tears streaming down my face, I promised, though a part of me doubted my ability to forgive so easily. Gerald smiled and squeezed my hand weakly. "One more thing," he whispered. "Thank you for loving me so well for all these years. You've made my life complete." 3 days later, Gerald slipped into a coma. I sat by his bedside reading aloud from his favorite books, playing the classical music he loved, and telling him stories about our life together. I called Raymond immediately, telling him that the end was near, and he should come quickly if he wanted to say goodbye. "I'll try to get there tomorrow, Mom," he said. "I have an important client meeting today that I can't reschedule." Gerald died peacefully at 2:35 in the morning, with me holding his hand but without his son by his side. As the first light of dawn broke through the window, I called Raymond. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I left a simple message. "Your father passed away an hour ago. Please call me back." 3 hours later, as I sat numb at the kitchen table with Barbara making funeral arrangements, Raymond finally returned my call. "Mom, I'm so sorry about Dad," he began, his voice thick with what seemed like genuine grief. "Will you come home today?" I asked. "We need to plan the funeral." There was a pause, then the response that would change our relationship forever. "Actually, Mom, about the funeral. Could we schedule it for next week? This Saturday is Amanda's 30th birthday, and we have a big celebration planned. 30 people are coming, and we've put down non-refundable deposits." The shock rendered me momentarily speechless. Barbara, who could hear Raymond's voice through the phone, looked at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Your father just died, Raymond," I finally managed to say, my voice surprisingly calm despite the storm raging inside me. "I know, Mom, and I'm devastated," he replied. "But Amanda has been planning this party for months. She says we can't cancel now. We'll come right after, I promise. Can't the funeral wait a few more days?" In that moment, something inside me hardened. "The funeral will be this Saturday at 11 in the morning at Grace Episcopal. Your father's friends and colleagues have already been notified. Whether you choose to be there is up to you." I hung up before he could respond, before I could say something I might regret. Barbara wrapped her arms around me as I finally broke down, sobbing not just for the loss of my beloved husband, but for the son who had become a stranger to me. The morning of Gerald's funeral dawned with a gentle spring rain that seemed fitting for the occasion. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the simple black dress I had purchased 2 days earlier. Gerald had always said I looked beautiful in blue, but today wasn't about beauty. It was about saying goodbye to the love of my life, the man who had been my partner in everything for 45 years. As I fastened the pearl necklace Gerald had given me on our 40th anniversary, I allowed myself one last moment of hope that Raymond would surprise me. Perhaps he had reconsidered after our call. Perhaps he realized that saying goodbye to his father took precedence over his wife's birthday celebration. Perhaps he was already on his way from Boston, rushing to make it in time. Barbara arrived at 9:30 to drive me to the church. She had stayed with me every night since Gerald's passing, sleeping in our guest room and fielding phone calls from well-wishers, so I could have moments of privacy with my grief. As we pulled into the church parking lot, I scanned the cars for Raymond's silver Audi but didn't see it. Grace Episcopal Church, where Gerald and I had attended services for over 30 years, was already filling with people when we arrived. Gerald's impact on the community was evident in the diverse crowd. Former students now grown with children of their own, colleagues from his 35 years of teaching, neighbors, friends from our book club and gardening society. Even the barista from the coffee shop Gerald visited every Saturday morning for his ritual cappuccino and crossword puzzle. Martin had organized a group of current and former teachers to serve as pallbearers. They stood solemnly by the hearse, these men and women who had shared faculty meetings, chaperoned school dances, and graded papers alongside my husband for decades. Their presence was a testament to how respected and beloved Gerald had been. Inside the church, I paused at the entrance to the sanctuary. At the front, Gerald's casket was surrounded by arrangements of blue hydrangeas and white lilies. A large photograph of him stood on an easel, capturing him in his element. Standing in front of his classroom, pointer in hand, enthusiasm radiating from his smile as he brought history alive for his students. Barbara gently guided me to the front pew, where a single chair remained empty beside mine. I had asked the funeral director to reserve it for Raymond, still clinging to the possibility that he might come. As I sat down, several people approached to offer condolences, their expressions shifting to uncomfortable sympathy when they glanced at the empty seat. "Raymond is on his way," I found myself saying to the first few people who asked. The lie felt bitter on my tongue, but the alternative, explaining that my only son had chosen his wife's birthday party over his father's funeral, was too humiliating to voice. By the time the service began, the church was completely full, with people standing along the back wall. Reverend Thomas, who had known Gerald from countless community service projects, spoke eloquently about Gerald's dedication to education, his kindness, and his quiet but profound faith. Former students shared moving stories about how Mr. Williams had changed their lives, inspired their career choices, or simply been there during difficult times. Martin gave a beautiful eulogy that balanced humor and sorrow perfectly, recounting 30 years of friendship with the man he called the conscience of Westfield High. Through it all, I sat straight-backed and dry-eyed, the empty chair beside me growing heavier with symbolism by the minute. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium with Barbara's steadying hand on my elbow. Looking out at the sea of faces, all those people whose lives Gerald had touched, I felt a momentary wave of vertigo. Then I began to speak about our 45 years together, about his courage during his illness, about the legacy he left in the hundreds of students he had taught. I didn't mention Raymond's absence. Some things are too painful to acknowledge publicly. After the church service, the burial was private, just me and the closest friends who had become my surrogate family. Raymond's absence was a physical ache as Gerald's casket was lowered into the ground. I placed a single blue hydrangea on top, whispered a final goodbye, and turned away from the man who had been my whole world since I was 19 years old. The reception was held in the church fellowship hall, where tables of food prepared by church members awaited the mourners. I stood in a receiving line for over 2 hours, accepting condolences and sharing brief memories of Gerald with each person who approached. Several people asked about Raymond, and I had perfected a vague response. "He wasn't able to make it today, unfortunately." Barbara never left my side, bringing me water, guiding me to sit when I looked tired, and graciously stepping in when emotions threatened to overwhelm me. By late afternoon, as the crowd thinned and only close friends remained, I finally allowed myself to sink into a chair, physical and emotional exhaustion catching up with me. That's when my phone chimed with a text message notification. It was from Raymond, and he had attached several photos of Amanda's birthday celebration. Amanda in a sparkling dress blowing out candles on an elaborate cake, both of them smiling with friends at what appeared to be an upscale restaurant, champagne glasses raised in toasts. The message read, "Wish you could have been here, Mom. Amanda had an amazing birthday. We'll drive down tomorrow to see you." I handed the phone to Barbara wordlessly. Her face flushed with anger as she saw the images, but she simply turned off the phone and put it in her purse. "Not today, Eleanor," she said gently. "You don't need to deal with this today." That night, back in the house that felt cavernous without Gerald, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For 45 years, I had fallen asleep to the sound of Gerald's breathing, sometimes his gentle snoring. Now there was only silence and the ticking of the antique clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from Gerald's parents. As dawn broke, I had not slept, but I had reached a decision. Gerald had asked me to try to rebuild my relationship with Raymond, and I would honor that request in my own way. But I would also honor myself and the memory of my husband by refusing to enable Raymond's selfish behavior any longer. Something needed to change, and since I couldn't change Raymond or Amanda, I would change the one thing I still controlled, my response to them. The day after the funeral, I asked Barbara to stay another night, not because I feared being alone but because I needed her financial expertise. Barbara had worked as a financial advisor for 30 years before retiring, and I trusted her judgment implicitly. After a simple dinner of soup and bread, neither of us having much appetite, I brought out the folder containing Gerald's will and our financial documents. "I need to make some changes," I said, spreading the papers on the dining room table. Barbara nodded, not looking surprised. "I've been wondering if you might." Gerald and I had created our wills 15 years earlier, with standard provisions leaving everything to each other and then to Raymond upon both our deaths. With Gerald gone, everything now came to me. Our house, his teacher's pension, our modest investment portfolio, and the life insurance policy his teacher's union had provided. Raymond is currently the sole beneficiary after me, I explained, though Barbara likely already knew this. I want to change that. For the next 2 hours, Barbara helped me take inventory of all our assets. The house was fully paid off and worth approximately $300,000 in our small Connecticut town. Gerald's pension would provide me with $2,000 monthly for the rest of my life. Our investments, carefully grown over decades of frugal living, amounted to just over $250,000. The life insurance policy was for $100,000. It's not a fortune, Barbara said, but it's significant. What are you thinking of doing? I took a deep breath. Gerald loved teaching more than anything except his family. His students were like his extended children. I'm thinking of establishing a scholarship in his name at Westfield High. Barbara smiled warmly. He would love that, Eleanor. The next morning I called Judith Abrams, an attorney who had been in our social circle for years. Her husband had been one of Gerald's fishing buddies until his own passing 3 years earlier. When I explained what I wanted to do, she immediately offered to meet with me that afternoon. In Judith's tastefully appointed office, with diplomas and family photos lining the walls, I laid out my intentions clearly. I want to remove Raymond as the primary beneficiary of my estate, I said, my voice steady despite the enormity of what I was proposing. Instead, I want to establish the Gerald Williams Memorial Scholarship for history students at Westfield High School. After my passing, I want the house to be sold and the proceeds, along with my remaining investments, to fund this scholarship in perpetuity. Judith made notes without commenting on the dramatic nature of my decision. And Raymond? She asked simply. I had given this considerable thought during my sleepless night. I don't want to disinherit him completely. That feels too punitive and Gerald wouldn't want that. Raymond should receive Gerald's personal effects. His watch, his books, his collection of historical maps. Those things have sentimental value but weren't specifically mentioned in the original will. Are you certain about this, Eleanor? Judith asked, her tone professional but gentle. This is a significant change. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied. Gerald dedicated his life to education. This way, his legacy will continue to support the passion he cared about most. Raymond made his choice when he decided his wife's birthday was more important than saying goodbye to his father. Over the next 2 weeks, Judith prepared the necessary documents while I met with Principal Diana Johnson at Westfield High to discuss establishing the scholarship. Diana had worked alongside Gerald for 20 years and was immediately supportive of the idea. We could award it annually to a graduating senior who excels in history and plans to pursue education or public service, she suggested. Gerald always encouraged students who wanted to give back to their communities. The details came together quickly. A committee of history faculty would select the recipient each year. The scholarship would provide $5,000 annually to the chosen student, and the school would host a special ceremony as part of graduation to present the award. The scholarship would be structured to continue for decades, ensuring Gerald's impact on education would outlive both of us. When the legal documents were ready, I returned to Judith's office to sign them. As I put pen to paper, formally changing the course of my family's legacy, I felt a curious mixture of sadness and liberation. Gerald had built his life around nurturing young minds and helping students achieve their potential. Now that work would continue in his name. We won't file these with the probate court until it becomes necessary, Judith explained. But they're legally binding as of today. I've also prepared a letter to be sent to Raymond at the appropriate time, explaining the changes in straightforward terms. When will he be notified? I asked. That depends on you, Judith replied. We could inform him now, or wait until later. It's entirely your decision. After considering the options, I decided to wait 6 months before informing Raymond. This wasn't about revenge or wanting to shock him. I simply needed time to grieve Gerald and strengthen my resolve before facing what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation with my son. As I drove home from Judith's office, passing the high school where Gerald had taught for 35 years, I felt a sense of peace settle over me for the first time since his diagnosis. The Gerald Williams Memorial Scholarship would ensure that his passion for education and history would benefit deserving students for generations to come. It was a fitting tribute to the man who had spent his life opening minds and inspiring young people. That evening, I sat in Gerald's study, surrounded by his books and the faint scent of his aftershave that somehow still lingered. "I hope you understand," I whispered to the empty room. "This feels right, like something you would have wanted if you'd known how things would turn out." In the silence that followed, I could almost hear Gerald's gentle voice saying, "You've always had good judgment, Eleanor. I trust you to do what's best." Whether it was my imagination or something more spiritual, the impression comforted me as I began the long process of rebuilding my life without him. True to his text message, Raymond arrived the day after the funeral with Amanda. Their visit lasted precisely 90 minutes, during which Amanda checked her watch repeatedly and mentioned 3 times that they needed to get back to Boston before dark. Raymond seemed subdued, occasionally glancing at the photos of Gerald displayed throughout the house, but he asked no questions about the funeral he had missed. When they left, promising to return soon, I stood in the driveway watching their car disappear down the street. There was an emptiness inside me where anger had burned so hotly just days before. I was entering a new phase of grief, one where emotional exhaustion left little room for rage. The weeks that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. I returned to teaching, finding solace in my 4th grade classroom where 28 young faces looked to me for guidance and stability. My colleagues treated me with kindness but not pity, for which I was grateful. Several of Gerald's former students sent heartfelt letters sharing memories of him, which I collected in a special album. At Barbara's gentle insistence, I joined a grief support group at the community center. Twice a month, I sat in a circle with other widows and widowers, listening to their stories and gradually sharing my own. There was comfort in this fellowship of loss, in knowing that others understood the 1,000 small ways grief manifests. The instinct to buy Gerald's favorite cereal at the grocery store, the habit of turning to tell him something before remembering he wasn't there, the emptiness of cooking for one. I also began seeing Dr. Lauren Henderson, a therapist specializing in grief counseling. In her peaceful office with its views of a Japanese garden, I spoke openly about my complicated feelings toward Raymond and Amanda. Dear Henderson never judged or pushed me toward forgiveness before I was ready. Instead, she helped me develop tools for setting boundaries while still leaving room for healing if Raymond ever recognized the pain he had caused. 3 months after the funeral, Raymond called to say he was coming to Connecticut for a work conference and wanted to have dinner. Amanda wouldn't be joining him, he explained, as she had commitments in Boston. I agreed to meet him at Lorenzo's, the Italian restaurant where our family had celebrated special occasions throughout Raymond's childhood. At dinner, Raymond seemed different, more present than he had been in years. He asked about my return to teaching, about the house, about how I was coping. When he mentioned Gerald, his voice caught, and for the first time, I glimpsed genuine grief in my son's eyes. "I miss him, Mom," he said simply. "There's so much I should have said to him." I nodded but offered no absolution. Yes, there was. Toward the end of the meal, Raymond tentatively asked if he could come visit the house the next day before heading back to Boston. "I'd like to see Dad study, maybe take a few books to remember him by, if that's okay." "The study is exactly as he left it," I replied. "You're welcome to visit." The following afternoon, I watched as Raymond wandered through Gerald's study, running his fingers along book spines, picking up the paperweight collection Gerald had accumulated over decades of teaching. He paused at the desk where stacks of student essays still sat, awaiting grades that would never come. "He was grading until the end?" Raymond asked, his voice thick. "Your father believed his students deserved his best, no matter what he was going through personally," I answered. The unspoken comparison hung in the air between us. Before leaving, Raymond selected 3 books. A worn copy of The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, that Gerald had read in college, a first-edition history of Connecticut that had been a gift from his own father, and the illustrated World War II chronicles that Raymond and Gerald had pored over together when Raymond was a boy. At the door, Raymond hugged me awkwardly. "I want to do better, Mom. I know I haven't been here for you or for Dad. I want to change that." I returned his hug but made no promises. Gerald had taught me the value of judging people by their actions, not their words. Raymond would need to demonstrate his commitment to rebuilding our relationship through consistent effort, not just momentary remorse. Over the next few months, Raymond did seem to be trying. He called more regularly, usually when Amanda was at yoga class or meeting friends for dinner. He sent thoughtful cards on my birthday and Mother's Day. He even drove up for a weekend in July, again without Amanda, and helped me clear out Gerald's clothing for donation, a task I had been avoiding. During that visit, as we folded Gerald's sweaters into boxes, Raymond confessed that he and Amanda were having problems. "She doesn't understand why I need to spend time with you," he said. "She thinks I should be over Dad's death by now and focusing on our future. Grief doesn't work according to someone else's timetable," I replied, carefully keeping judgment out of my voice. "It takes as long as it takes." Raymond nodded, looking troubled. "I'm starting to see things differently, Mom. Since Dad died, I've been thinking a lot about what really matters." I wanted to believe this represented a genuine change in Raymond, but I remained cautious. Too many times, Amanda had pulled him back into her orbit, just as he began to reconnect with us. Still, this felt like the first authentic conversation we'd had in years. In early September, exactly 6 months after Gerald's passing, I called Judith to let her know it was time to send the letter to Raymond. "Are you certain?" she asked. "There's no rush." "I'm certain," I replied. "He needs to know, and I'm ready to have that conversation." A week later, Raymond called me, his voice tight with shock and anger. "Mom, I just got a letter from your lawyer. What is this about changing Dad's will?" "It's my will now, Raymond," I corrected him gently. "And yes, I've made some changes that I believe better honor your father's legacy. But the house, the investments, everything is going to some scholarship?" His voice rose in disbelief. "What about me? What about your own son? You'll receive all of your father's personal possessions," I explained calmly. "His books, his maps, his watch, the things that connected you as father and son. That's not the same as an inheritance." Raymond's shock was giving way to indignation. "This isn't fair, Mom. Dad would never have wanted this. Your father wanted you to be part of his life and his death," I replied, my voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. "You made different choices. The Gerald Williams Memorial Scholarship will help students who share his passion for history and education. It's a fitting tribute to the work that defined his life." "So this is punishment," Raymond said bitterly, "for missing the funeral."
"No, Raymond.
This isn't punishment. It's a consequence. There's a difference. The scholarship is something positive that will come from our loss. It will help deserving students for many years to come. I can contest this, you know," he threatened. "I could challenge the will." "You could," I acknowledged, "but it would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful." Judith assured me the changes are legally sound. More importantly, is that really how you want to honor your father's memory? With a legal battle against your mother? The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken recriminations. Finally, Raymond spoke again, his voice subdued. "I need time to process this." "Take all the time you need," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." After we hung up, I sat in Gerald's favorite armchair, emotionally drained but strangely at peace. For the first time since changing the will, I questioned whether Gerald would truly have approved of my decision. But as I watched the sunset through the window where he had so often sat grading papers or reading, I felt a quiet certainty that redirecting our modest legacy toward education was the right choice. The scholarship would ensure that Gerald's passion for teaching would continue to change lives long after both of us were gone. As autumn painted the Connecticut landscape in brilliant shades of crimson and gold, I received no further communication from Raymond. I had expected anger, perhaps even legal threats as he had suggested, but the silence was somehow more difficult to bear. Despite everything, he was still my only child, the baby I had cradled, the boy I had raised, the man I had hoped would carry forward the values Gerald and I had tried to instill. 6 weeks after the letter from Judith, Principal Diana Johnson called to inform me that the school board had unanimously approved the Gerald Williams Memorial Scholarship. The first award would be presented at the spring graduation ceremony, less than a year after Gerald's passing. The news brought tears to my eyes, the good kind that come with knowing something meaningful has been accomplished. "We'd like you to present the scholarship, Eleanor," Diana said. Gerald's colleagues in the history department are already working on the selection criteria. They want to honor his emphasis on critical thinking and civic engagement. I agreed immediately, grateful for this tangible way to celebrate Gerald's legacy. That evening, after much consideration, I sent Raymond a text message. The Gerald Williams Memorial Scholarship has been officially established at Westfield High. The first recipient will be selected this spring. You're welcome to attend the ceremony if you'd like to see your father's legacy in action. 3 days passed before I received a response, just 2 words. I'll come. As winter settled over Connecticut, bringing short days and long, quiet evenings, I continued rebuilding my life. The grief support group and sessions with Dr. Henderson helped me navigate the first holiday season without Gerald. I declined an invitation to spend Christmas with Raymond and Amanda in Boston, choosing instead to host a small dinner for Barbara, Martin, and several other friends who had become my surrogate family. In February, a surprising phone call disrupted my carefully reconstructed routine. It was Raymond asking if he could visit that weekend alone. Amanda and I are taking some time apart, he explained, his voice weary. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Mom. About Dad, about you, about the kind of man I want to be. When Raymond arrived on Saturday morning, the changes in him were immediately apparent. He had lost weight, and new lines creased his forehead. But his eyes were clearer somehow, as if a veil had been lifted. As we sat in the kitchen drinking coffee, he began to speak with a rawness I hadn't heard from him in years. After I got the letter about the will, I was furious, he admitted. I called Amanda, expecting her to be as outraged as I was. Instead, she asked how much money we were losing. He shook his head. That's when something clicked. All those years when Dad was sick, when he was dying, when he needed me, I wasn't there because Amanda always had something more important scheduled. And I let her make those decisions. I listened without interrupting, seeing the painful self-awareness dawning in my son's expression. I started thinking about all the Sunday dinners I missed, all the holidays I spent with her family instead of with you and Dad. I thought about Dad's funeral and how I convinced myself that Amanda's birthday party couldn't be rescheduled. His voice broke. What kind of son does that, Mom? What kind of man misses his own father's funeral for a party? We all make mistakes, Raymond, I said gently. The question is what we learn from them. I've learned that I lost myself somewhere along the way, he replied. I forgot the values Dad taught me about loyalty, about family, about showing up for the people you love. He reached across the table for my hand. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I understand now what I did to you and Dad. That weekend marked the beginning of a slow reconciliation between us. Raymond helped me sort through more of Gerald's belongings, listening intently as I shared stories about our early years together, the struggles and joys that had shaped our marriage. For the first time since he was a teenager, Raymond seemed genuinely interested in understanding who his father had been as a person, not just as a parent. Before leaving on Sunday, Raymond asked if he could attend the next meeting of my grief support group as a family member. I need to learn how to grieve Dad properly, he explained. I've been running from it, and that's not working. In March, Principal Johnson invited me to the high school to review the applications for the inaugural Gerald Williams Memorial Scholarship. The history department had narrowed the field to 3 exceptional students, each embodying different aspects of Gerald's teaching philosophy. After careful consideration, we selected Alicia Matthews, a brilliant young woman from a single-parent household who planned to study history and secondary education at the University of Connecticut, Gerald's alma mater. When I told Raymond about Alicia, he asked thoughtful questions about her goals and background. Dad would have loved teaching her, he said, a statement that confirmed he was beginning to understand the purpose of the scholarship. In late May, Raymond drove from Boston to attend the award ceremony without Amanda. They had decided to divorce, a decision that seemed to bring him both sadness and relief. As we sat together in the auditorium of Westfield High School, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds that had been the backdrop of Gerald's career, I felt Gerald's presence more strongly than I had since his passing. When Principal Johnson called me to the stage to present the first Gerald Williams Memorial Scholarship, Raymond squeezed my hand in silent support. Standing at the podium, looking out at the sea of graduates in their caps and gowns, I spoke briefly about Gerald's dedication to education and his belief that understanding history was essential to creating a better future. Alicia Matthews approached the stage with graceful confidence, her honors cord swinging as she climbed the steps. As I handed her the certificate representing a $5,000 scholarship, I saw in her eyes the same intellectual curiosity and determination that Gerald had nurtured in generations of students. "Thank you, Mrs. Williams," she said warmly. "Mr. Williams was a legend at this school. Everyone says he made history come alive. I never had him as a teacher, but his influence is still felt in every history classroom. I promise to make him proud." Returning to my seat beside Raymond, I noticed tears streaming down his face. He made no attempt to wipe them away, instead watching intently as Alicia returned to her place among her classmates. After the ceremony, as we walked slowly to the parking lot, Raymond turned to me. "I understand now why you created the scholarship, Mom. It's exactly what Dad would have wanted." His work continuing through students like Alicia. For the first time since changing the will, I felt complete certainty that I had made the right decision. "Your father believed education was the most powerful force for positive change in the world," I said. "Now his belief will continue to create ripples for years to come." Over the following months, Raymond and I established a new relationship based on honesty and mutual respect. He moved back to Connecticut after his divorce was finalized, taking a position at an engineering firm 30 minutes from my home. Our Sunday dinners resumed, sometimes with friends joining us, sometimes just the two of us sharing memories of Gerald and creating new traditions of our own. Raymond's journey toward understanding the consequences of his choices was not always smooth. There were difficult conversations, moments of backsliding, occasions when old patterns threatened to reemerge. But with each passing month, I saw more clearly the man Gerald had always believed Raymond could become. Thoughtful, compassionate, present. On the one-year anniversary of Gerald's death, Raymond and I visited the cemetery together, placing blue hydrangeas on his grave. As we stood there in companionable silence, Raymond spoke quietly. "I've been thinking about the scholarship, Mom. I'd like to contribute to it monthly from my salary. Not to change your decision about the will, but to be part of Dad's legacy in my own way." His offer touched me deeply, not for the financial support but for what it represented. Raymond's genuine desire to honor his father's memory and values. The path to healing after betrayal and loss is rarely straight or simple. There are days when grief still overwhelms me, moments when I reach for Gerald out of habit, only to be reminded anew of his absence. There are also times when I question whether I've been too harsh with Raymond, too unforgiving of his mistakes. But then I remember Gerald's patient wisdom, and his belief that we must all face the consequences of our choices to truly grow. Creating the Gerald Williams Memorial Scholarship transformed my grief into something productive and lasting. Each year, as a new recipient is selected, I see Gerald's passion for education continuing to change lives. And in Raymond's gradual awakening to the values his father embodied, I see another kind of legacy taking root. If there's one lesson I've learned through this painful journey, it's that we honor our loved ones not just through our memories but through our actions. Gerald's life was defined by his dedication to education and his unwavering integrity. By establishing the scholarship in his name and holding Raymond accountable for his choices, I've tried to uphold those same principles. To those of you watching who may be struggling with family betrayal or difficult decisions about inheritance, I encourage you to consider what legacy truly means. Sometimes the most loving choice isn't the easiest one. Sometimes true healing requires hard boundaries and painful consequences. And sometimes, as in our case, those very consequences can open the door to genuine reconciliation and growth. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about inheritance or family relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more reflections on family, healing, and finding strength in difficult times. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that even in our darkest moments, there is always potential for redemption and new beginnings.